If you're like me, when you read through the genealogies in the Bible, you get a little, I don't know if the word is bored, but maybe you skip some parts and so on and so forth. But I've been trying to like pace myself through the genealogies because I found out there's like these little nuggets dropped in there that are kind of like drama from back in the day, but some of them are good too. Like, you've ever heard of the books about the prayer of Jabez? That was just literally in the middle of First Chronicles 4. And it says, "And Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, and that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain." So God granted him what he requested. And then it just goes straight back into genealogy. It's like it just drops that little nugget of how he prayed faithfully. And I think we need to be careful when we read how people prayed in scripture and realize that there's a lot of different ways that people pray. And the principle here is that God heard his faithfulness and answered his prayers. And that's ultimately what we can get from for us too. It's not like this was a recipe for praying like him, which is basically what those books did, is just made it a recipe. Also, further on, it mentions a bunch of other names, but then it says in 38, "And these mentioned by name were leaders in their families, and their father's house increased greatly. So they went to the entrance of Gedor, as far as the east side of the valley, to seek pasture for their flocks, and they found rich, good pasture, and the land was broad, quiet, and peaceful." Like, doesn't that just sound like what all of us would want? Like, it sounds like I just want land that's fruitful and peaceful. That sounds amazing. And it's just dropped in the middle of a bunch of names. All of these things were mentioned intentionally. It gives us a glimmer into what these specific people's life was like, which I think is really great because it connects us to people who lived so long ago, and we can really remember that these were people. So often we can look at the complexity of some of these names, other than like Michael and Joel and Samuel, but like some of these names are really difficult to say for us who speak English. And we can kind of just skim over the fact that these were people. These were people just like you and I. And their names were accounted in a book that is still read today. And what a blessing for them that we can remember the things they did. I mean, other than Reuben, we don't want to really remember that. That was a whole, that starts in 5. But I think that it's really interesting that we get to step back in time and read about these names. And though it's mostly men who are mentioned, there's still some women who are mentioned. And I think that's even more remarkable because women were not mentioned nearly as much. And I think it's just really interesting. And it's kind of like captured my heart of what I've been reading through. So if you have ever been bored of the genealogies, don't say I'm bored of the genealogies, because you might suddenly find yourself like devouring the first 4 or 5 chapters of First Chronicles like me.